Hello, my name is Noelle Peterson. I'm a women empowerment coach, speaker, and author. I am so excited to share with Pearl today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Once you leave the clouds, you're under 80. Funny how there ain't no rain or clear. Why'd it take so long to leave you in the rearview mirror? Now nobody gonna steal my sunshine or turn my blue sky gray. All I know is at the end of the day, wildflowers grow when there ain't no shade.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl again. Welcome back to another Conversations with Pearl. And as you know, I am Pearl Sharenza, the owner and founder of Women's Successful Living, where we love to empower you to become a hero of your life by wearing your superpowers first so that they can become stronger for those that you love or whatever in life you are trying to achieve. And today I'm so excited because my guest, I met her at an amazing boot camp that I went to a few months back. And also, we have a lot in common, and you're going to hear that in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about that. But Noelle Peterson is passionate about helping women step into their identity and power so they can create the life they desire. Excuse me. She is the author of Dream Life Planner, Move from Tired and Overwhelmed to Free and Empowered. She's a co-author of Achieve Wellness. She and the pretty half of the smiling coaching couple. He's got a good smile, though, I have to admit. Noelle helps women awaken their dreams and design a path to reach them. She works with you on your identity, your values, and boundaries by raising your awareness of your innate purpose and desire, allowing you to align your daily tasks and goals with your life's dream. Welcome to the show, Noelle.
Thanks for having me, Pearl. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yes, I can't wait. Oh my gosh. So we have so much in common. We're going to get to that in a minute. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the journey that led you. I know the story and we have, things very much in common with the story, but I would love for you to share with our listeners what brought you to the path of realizing that it was important for you to start putting yourself first.
Yeah, so I was a missionary wife and pastor wife for 20 years. I spent many years being somebody else's something. I was a mom, a wife, a mother, coworker, whatever. And I never took the time to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do and what I was set here on this earth for. In 21, I ended up in ER and headed to open heart surgery with 13 days in ICU and cardiac care for a woman who was healthy and not doing anything under a doctor's care. There was no reason to be seeing a doctor. It was eye-opening for my family and I to take advantage of every moment we have. I spent 6 months recovering and looking at life and where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? Um, I ended up leaving my job. I wrote a book the year prior, and it's time to focus on the purpose I have in life and helping women find their purpose. And that's what we're here for. We all have a story. We all have a reason for being on this earth. We're still here. There's something left to do for each of us. And we need to do that in the best capability we have. And that's my goal is to help women realize that and find that path for themselves.
Wow, it seems like it's like amazing what it sometimes takes, that one thing, that aha moment. And it could be like what you said, landing up in the hospital and having to have this emergency surgery and then coming out going, okay, my world has just been turned upside down. And really, I like how you said, I'm tired of being someone else's someone. I think that's such a powerful statement. And that's where like, and then realizing that and then starting to put the steps for into leaning into that because it's not easy. And we can come out and have these aha moments. Like I share often on the show where and you've heard my story where I did this identity and destiny class. And for 6 weeks, I was like, oh, I got this down. And when it came time to do my statement, I was like, I'm still a wife and a mom. I was still, as you called it, somebody else's someone, but why wasn't I my own someone, and to go through that path and, to start those steps, like I said, to lean into it. It's not easy. I mean, because, we deal with guilt. We're wives, we're women. First of all, let's just start there. It's something that I think is in our DNA that, this nurturing stage of us ourselves. And then when you add to it that you're a wife, and then you add to it, you have children. And then I think even for like you being a pastor's wife, there's a whole different kind of expectations. I have a friend who's also a pastor's wife, and we've talked about this before, where people come to you and somewhat, and we have this, and I know that I'm guilty of it too, even at the Catholic Church. We look at these our leaders in our churches. It's like they lead these perfect lives, and and we have to understand that no, we're all human. They're human as well, and to lean into that is hard. It's hard work, and then to be able to say to those around you, whether it's people at the church, whether it's your job, whether it's your children, your husband, to be able to lean into them and say, "I love you, and I need to do this because I love you." Oftentimes, and I'm sure, Noelle, you've heard this too, where, women will come in and I'm coaching with them like, "Yeah, but what are they gonna think about me?" We're so worried about what other people think and what their thoughts were. And I wanna share this with you. I share this on social media yesterday and all my things about the concept of who we think we are when we're when we're out in the world and we forget that our world could turn upside down, right? And so I did this quote yesterday: be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And I think we forget that our loved ones aren't going to mind. In fact, they're probably hoping that we do something for ourselves. So, like Noelle, we don't end up in the hospital. We don't run ourselves ragged. We don't say we're hitting the snooze button because we can't get up in the morning because we're so tired, we didn't sleep, and or maybe we're going to bed. We're worrying about, oh my gosh, did Johnny do his homework, that project, all those things. So, I would love to know, Elle, for you to share with the listeners, like, what were some of the things that you put in place to start that step into that new world that you were creating for yourselves? And then what was some of the pushback you dealt with as well?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that it it doesn't have to be a single moment in time where, oh, I know what I need to do, and you switch and you change gears. For me, it's been 19 months since my surgery. It's been the recovery time and the thinking of, going back to work and that transition and starting to write a blog and looking at life going forward and processing through at least the last 12 months of what do I really want to do? What am I here for? And every day taking time to step back and evaluate, wait a sec, I'm still doing all this for them. How can I take time today to work on my things? I want to write. I want to do this. My life needs to go this direction, but he still needs me over here. And so it's a balancing act of figuring out how to take care of me and how to do the things for my business and my future that are different than my husband's, who, even though we share an office, we share a business, there's things that I need to do for my role in life that are different and separate. And I'm daily trying to figure out how to make time and make myself say, no, I can do that for you later. I need to do this right now. And it's prioritizing what's important for me. One of the things that we work with our clients, and I definitely work with women, is what do you want to do? What is it you want in life? So for me, I wanted to be a stay at home grandma. And when I said that 5 years ago, I thought it was clear. Being a stay at home grandma meant being at home and available for the grandkids. Well, then COVID hit. Stay at home grandma meant something different because I still had my 9 to 5 that I had to do. But for me, getting up in the morning is to do what I need to do to share with the world, share with ladies that they have a reason. We all have a story. I spent 48 years thinking I didn't have anything worth saying. I didn't have a reason for me to get up on stage and share anything. It was just me. It was just my normal story, nothing big, no big deal. But we all have different pieces of life that brought us here. And each one may not seem like much, but it is your story. It is the reason that you're here. It is what has got you here. And it is the reason that you have the reason to share with your audience what it is that, what you're here for. And each of us is different. And that's why we're supposed to be different. If we were all like each other, it wouldn't be any fun. And so I've worked on being intentional on who I'm spending time with, what I'm working on, and what my calendar says I need to do, what my to-do list. I am a very much a notes person, so keeping track of what needs done and marking it off is, the highlight of the day. But some days it just gets busy and life takes over. And that's how it is. We've spent all of our married and motherhood lives taking care of everybody else. We got to find ways in ourselves to do that for us. 'Cause I feel like we're going to be much better women, more impactful women in our worlds when we can take care of us and focus on what is priority for us. If you know what you want, you know that path you're headed towards, and husband, wife, kids, school, job, whatever comes in with different tasks or different ideas, you can filter them through the perspective of what your purpose is. And if it's not going to align with what you need to do, it's okay to say no because you're saying yes to your priorities. You're saying yes to you. I'm not saying you're going to say no to, feeding the kids. That's not how it is. But you can adjust and say, well, I've got 10 more minutes. I've got to get this project done, and then I'll make you dinner. You don't have to drop it now. The kids are not the most important thing all the time, especially when they're older and they can go fix it themselves, right? it, it's working through those processes and evaluating things individually in the bigger picture filter. And what does that mean?
Yeah, I love you said, the kids don't always have to be the priority. And it reminds me of I've shared this before. My sister-in-law, she's just so amazing. And I don't know what they call it, but she actually, years ago, my nephew is now, I think 8. So he's around 4, maybe. And I went to go visit them in California, and she's like, hey, come upstairs. Sean's got to put his clothes away. And I was like, put his clothes away. Okay. I want to see this, 4-year-old put away his clothes. Right. And so I went up there and she's like, listen, I said, why do you do this? Cause I was watching him put him in the bottom drawer and it wasn't neat, it wasn't expected. She's like, listen, I look at this, I work out of the house. I come home, I have to still work at home as a mom and a wife. And she said, so I look at this is a business that we're running here at home. And he has a role in this business, and his role is to pick up after himself, help put his clothes away. And she's like, it doesn't mean he does it perfectly, but at least the act of learning to take care of himself is happening as well as being a participant in the business of then running the house. I was like, oh my God, you're like a CEO mom. I was like, that's what I called her. And I have a friend that wrote a book about CEO mom, but I was like, this is truly what I think is a CEO mom. And so I was like, no more stay-at-home mom, no more working mom. Cause I think at that time I was in the role of going full-time into my business, but still working some, and I was like, I just love that. So, you're right. Our kids, I think as that, my generation, I know you and I are not too far apart in age, that we grew up, my granny took care of everything. She didn't even work out of the house. Then my mom took care of everything, but she also worked out of the house. And then now, my generation, we kind of did a little bit of that. But then, like you were saying, at some point we went, hey, this is not who I am. My inner self is saying, yeah, I'm a wife and mom, and I want to do this. I have, my dreams. I have these things that, what is my why? Like what learning to, why, what is my why? Because it's, if we leave this world tomorrow, if God says he wants us back, life is going to go on. Our kids will miss us. Our spouse will miss us. They will learn, hopefully, a way to carry on. And the thing is like our job will replace us in 5 minutes, right? So it's like, what is your why? And what, I have a great mentor. I have a small business. It's called Market America. And J.R. Reidinger, he every time we would go to convention, he always talked about the dash. What is your dash? And this man passed away last year, and I can tell you, he was example of living your dash. And it reminded me that, when we leave this earth and our family goes to our funeral, and if you were to say to them, all you're allowed to say about Noelle and Pearl is what you saw them do for themselves and what their why was. Are they even going to know what that answer is? And if we don't set that example and communicate with our family, our friends, our loved ones, our realistic expectations of this is what want to achieve, this is why I want to achieve it, and this is what it means to me, we're doing ourselves the biggest disservice, but we're also not teaching them on the example of this is how they should also be living their lives. I love it how you said that and being intentional about that. You know, like what is your story and how are you intentionally living it? Because you're right, Noelle. I totally agree with you. Everybody has a story. I have the best opportunity in the world to work with a nonprofit. I coach women. There are about 25 of them, and I tell each and every one of them, you have a book to be written. You have a story. As you come through this challenge, you're going to come out the other side and you're going to be able to empower somebody else that's about to walk a journey similar to yours. Right. And so I love that you touched on that, we have that story. So one of the things that my husband was a government employee. I saw the amount of time and work he put into that and all the things he had to do outside of work and everything. And, and I watched him too. He just retired. It'll be 2 years ago, I think this November. But I watched him, especially through COVID, like help his staff work through balance. Like you were talking about trying to find that balance. I think sometimes we struggle with that in our life because of the guilt of, especially for women, but if I don't go over here, they're going to feel neglected, right? And I remembered watching him. He was so amazing, and it really warmed my heart to see that there are men in this world that understand the need for self-care. I think they all, for the most part, understand it. They just don't know the communication part of it sometimes. But I was listening to him. He had an employee that the wife and husband both work government jobs and both demanding jobs. But his staff member, he was struggling with the schedule because they also had a little boy that they had to do homeschooling for, right? This realm of what the parents got thrown into was you both have jobs, but you both got to figure out how to teach, right? And they didn't sign up to do that. And I remember listening to him and listening to him coach his staff member on, okay, listen, for me, I don't care when you get the work done in the day as long as you're getting it done. So if your spouse needs to go in and do their job because they don't have that flexibility with their employer, then go for it. Let them do it. You go to the school and then switch later in the day. And it was so powerful to see how he communicated that. And I think for me, sometimes one of the things that I come up against with when I'm working with my clients, it is the big part of communicating with our job, our loved ones, our children, that these are my needs, these are my whys. So when you work with your clients, Noelle, how do you walk them through setting those expectations, one for themselves, but also communicating those realistic expectations to their loved ones, their job, and so forth?
Yeah, communication is a big one. And one of the things that we've worked with it through marriage counseling over our 25 years of ministry is just the expectations and the open communication and how you really need to be using your two ears more than your mouth the way that God gave them to you, and active listening. So being willing to just sit and listen without the expectations of a response, without a reaction. You need to be able to hear what's really being said. And then you need to be able to verbalize your feelings and your expectations in I statements. And sometimes it's making those statements in your head first in a conversation with yourself in a journal, because you may not know what those expectations are. We go through life a lot of times with unverbalized expectations, even in our own subconscious. We don't acknowledge what is actually in our own minds and our own expectations. And when we can say them to ourselves, then we can work on saying them to others. It is very much a world where we have to listen to ourselves as much. And I want to challenge you on the balance of life, because if you think about a teeter totter, when you finally get that absolute balance, everything has to stop. Nobody can move, but life goes on, and the teeter totter keeps teetering. We like to talk about harmony, and is what you're doing in harmony with who you are and what you want in life. And sometimes you need to give more of that time to a child or to the spouse or to work, with the understanding in your world that you're balancing all of that and you're harmonizing what life means. And I need to work hard this week, so I can't do as much family, or vice versa. But you are going to be giving more time to the kids because you only have them for 18 years. And that experience, that relationship, that communication has to build that foundation. I think it was the CEO of Coke that gave a commencement speech and talked about all the balls of life. Most of the balls of life are rubber, and they'll bounce back. Family is glass. If you drop that, it's very difficult to fix. Balance the balls of life strategically, intentionally, so that you don't drop anything that's glass or breakable and harder to fix. Work will bounce back. Like you said, it will replace you 5 minutes after you resign or you leave the job. My boss had no problem taking one of my employees and putting him in my position. She didn't even flinch when I said I'm resigning. She's done, doesn't matter. My family, on the other hand, when I ended up in the hospital, life stopped. Have to evaluate the whole picture. And it's hard to see the big picture when you're in the midst of a crisis. But when you're taking care of yourself and you're journaling and you're doing the things that you need to do to be healthy and calm and relaxed in life, you're able to see things more clearly and from a broader perspective when they do happen.
Yeah, so what you said about family and glass is so true. I mean, you know my story. We lost our son last July in a tragic car accident, and the world stopped. I mean, it literally came to a screeching halt. Him and my husband did a business together. I mean, my husband had to push through and still do that because we didn't have a backup plan for anybody to help him on that. So even through those first few days until, he could be like, okay, I have to shut down, this is what's happening. It did it come to a screeching halt. And you're right. I love that they give the example of, your family is glass, and they're very breakable, and they need you during these, like you said, 18 years. It's interesting you brought that up as well. I have I'm very close to my son's friends, and I'm very connected with both of my boys, and making sure that they're acknowledging their friends and being there for their friends as well. And my son had a really good friend who he was always there to listen to this young man. And since Matt's passed, he's going through some stuff with the mother of his child, and he's trying to do custody. They were never married, so he's trying to do custody. And unfortunately, the mother's playing games and using the child as a pawn, and all those things. And he was here, and he had visitation, supposed to have her every so many hours, every couple of days. And so it was her birthday, and she was here, and this mother put an Apple Watch on a 5-year-old and was tracking her, and that watch. And then whenever she was with my son's friend, she was calling like every 5 minutes. So no kidding, we just blow out the candles on the cake, and this Apple Watch goes off, rings, the mother's calling. And this little girl literally went like, she just jumped in shock, and you saw this fear on her face. And I pulled him aside and I said, told him, I said, listen, just so you understand, 7 years old, you got 2 years to try to help her get through this, and pray this doesn't affect her the rest of her life. But she has been set up with fear, and that you guys are not, good together in communication. And he's a young man that any mom would want their daughter to marry, and want them to be the father of your grandchildren, because he is so kind and caring and gives. He would get a phone call and be like, Well, if you want to see her, come put gas in my car. If you want to see her, I need food. And I'm telling you, he would go. And just recently, she decided she was supposedly going on vacation. She was trying to leave and something was wrong with her car. And because in his mind, his daughter's going to be in this car, he went over and helped her fix the car. But she took off and hasn't come back with this little girl out of state. So he has an attorney to help him with that. But I literally looked at him, Noelle, and I said, don't take this the wrong way, but your cojones have to get into your mouth and you need to really button down and be ready because what your glass, and I told him, I go, your glass around you is starting to break. And I know your biggest cup is your daughter. And I don't want to see the glass break on you. And I had him on, I was on with him and this attorney yesterday. I'm like, I'm here for you. So he's like, can you hop on the call with me? I'm like, absolutely. Whatever way I can support. And, and I told him, I said, I know this is so expensive. And you just have to remember, you're going to get through it. It's going to be tight on your budget. You're going to maybe have to get a second job around her schedule, but understand you're helping your daughter for the rest of her life to be important and to let her see that to fight for what you want, fight for what's right. And, you're right. I mean, family is like glass and harmony. The other word you said was harmony. You're right. Because like you said, that if it's completely balanced, it's not moving. And that's not life. Life is always moving. There's always something. The needle's trying to be threaded one way or the other way. The balance, it's always moving. So how can you find that harmony? And I love that you share that example. So for those that are listening, Noelle, if somebody, I want to touch on the saying no piece, because you mentioned that earlier, right? And with what we're talking about, the word no has to come in a lot to play, and learning to say no is hard. I share the story here all the time that I was a people pleaser. You want me to do something? Yes. Like I didn't even think 2 seconds about, okay, where do you want me to help? Okay. And now I'm not that way, but it wasn't easy to change that mindset of thinking I had to do everything for somebody because if I said no, I would feel guilty and all these things that we tell ourselves in the front of our brain of, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to think I don't like them, all these things. For me, saying no meant drastic change for myself. So I actually, for the listeners, I took a pebble and I put it in my pocket. And if I didn't have pockets on it, I put it in my bra strap. And I had to move it 3 times a day by saying no to something. And I found a couple of things. One, I found that as I started to do that, it became easier to say no. I started to say it so much more excitedly instead of feeling guilty out of my voice and my tone. And then the big thing I realized was that when I was saying no to something, maybe it's something either A, I wanted to do, but just wasn't in my schedule this year. So I would tell them, hey, circle back around with me for next year. Or B, I didn't want to do it, but I knew somebody. So I found that I was opening doors for other people to step in and help them. And I shared on a post today that there's a great local author and she's trying to get information, about her book out. And I had her on my podcast here. We've been out and about to different events locally, but I was able to connect her with an international podcast and get her exposure there. And so by saying no to doing the podcast for them, because it wasn't my schedule, I was like, hey, I've got this person. So tell us, Noelle, how did you find learning to say no to be for yourself? And then how did you flip that switch for yourself?
Yeah, it's a long process. I mean, I didn't learn anything easy. And everything's taken me time. Um, but I was a principal at an international school and I was, leading the teachers and they were really on my case because I would just do anything that needed done. I was pretty solid that I would only work between school hours because when the kids were in school, I could be working. But if my kids were home, I was a mom. So I did have that boundary put in place. But I would still take some work home. I would work on the schedule at home while the kids were sleeping. Not much, but they were very much, you need to stop doing everything. It's not okay. I'm like, but I can. Why not? Why, So I was really struggling with the no concept as well. And we had a speaker come into a teacher retreat that year that talked about saying yes to priorities. And so really it's looking at what is your priority? What is your focus? What are you supposed to be doing? And what is your goal in life? And saying yes to those. So there's this task that needs done after school. No, so and so can do it. Like you said, there's other people that can step in. I think that's a lot of the pictures. We don't allow other people to take advantage of these opportunities because we take them and we just do it. But as women, we need to be nurturing others and mentoring others and giving those opportunities to other people. So I really feel that part of it is opening ourselves up to, well, that's not perfect for me. Who do I know that could do that? And looking at it differently that way. And so you're not really saying no in that case. You're saying, Susie would be great at doing that. Let's talk to her. And you're you're saying yes to a different opportunity. You're reframing it. And I think that's the bigger picture for me is looking at what are the options. Look at look at other ways that you can solve this issue. That person needs somebody on the podcast or they need somebody to do this task. Who's available? Who could be good at that? There's other people in the world. It's not all us. The weight of the world is not on our shoulders. It shouldn't be on our shoulders. We're not strong enough. And it's hard to say no. It really is. I really do feel, oh, that needs done. The person needs a graphic for this thing. I can do that. Let me jump in there. But my time is valuable. My time is precious. And if we can't value our time, we're going to get overwhelmed. So what is my time worth? And if you'll pay me to do that, then okay, we'll talk. But if that's just a job that needs done, they can find somebody who can do it, or they'll come up with the money and outsource it or something.
Right. I love those that sharing that you just did. It reminded me. I went from being the call Pearl, she'll do it for you, to being the call Pearl, she knows somebody. As what I found happened, and as I was saying no, I became that connector. Oh, call Pearl, she'll know somebody, and so much to the degree that I had a friend call me yesterday, and she's like, "Hey, that event you're going to on April 15th." I'm like, April 15th. I'm like, what did I not put on my calendar? Like, I'm looking at my calendar. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And what it was, I had shared a women's event that's coming up here. And because I'm so connected to different things, they assumed I was connected to that event. And I'm like, oh, and then I said, I can't find, like, I literally was going through my phone going, my emails, my comment. I go, when you find it, screenshot it and send it to me. So she sent it to me this morning. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not speaking at that event. I just love the event. I think it's a great thing to do. And I'm like, I haven't decided if I'm going. It's a free event. She's like, well, I'm going to go. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go with you since you were so, adamant and good about finding it. But I realized as you were sharing that I went from being that people pleaser to doing everything to being the person who's connected to that degree that I'm like going, wow, I didn't even realize I'd connected all those dots for somebody together, So it's really powerful when we can do that as well. I love that you reminded me of that. So tell us what, as a client comes to you, Noelle, what can they expect their journey to be like with you?
So we spend time looking at their inside, what's in between their ears, what's going on, where are they at in life, what areas need worked on, and what's important. So we want to picture that dream. Look at 6 months down the road, 5 years, however far out you can think. What do you want it to look like? And then we're going to talk about what that celebration would look like when you get there. And then we'll figure out the steps to make it happen. Because we got to have that dream in mind so we know what we're aiming for. And life is open. It is a full white canvas. We can picture it however we want, but I will say you need to be specific. Don't picture a dream house and I want a dream house on the beach. It's not good enough. Your mind is not going to bring that to fruition. Be specific about what you want. What kind of car, what kind of house, what city, how many floors, how many rooms. Be very specific so that you can work on making it happen, because you want to picture it. You want to be in the moment. You want to feel what it's like to live there. And in that moment, and the person that you become that is worthy of having that place and that dream. And then you'll make those steps to make it happen.
To me, it reminds me of the file cabinet in our heads, right? We have that front file cabinet, like you were talking about between the ears, the front file cabinet that tells us all these negative thoughts that are like, that seems like the thing that pops out first, right? And then it's like, no, if I get to the stuff between my ears, that stuff kind of gets shredded away. And then I can really back here go, oh, I knew all that was in there. Why am I not listening to what's in there? Why am I not realizing it? I was speaking with somebody yesterday and she said she wants to be better. She doesn't want to be the best. She wants to be better than the best, right? Like elevating it up higher, I want to be, better than the best. I want to dream bigger. Yeah, I want to dream, but I want to dream bigger, right? Then, I loved how she was sharing that yesterday with me. And that stuff between our ears can be such a negative talk for us. And being specific of what we want it's hard work. It's not easy because sometimes I think what happens too, and this happened with a client of mine, she realized when we really dug deep, she wasn't happy in her marriage. And so she was like, she was like, I got to do work or I got to decide I'm not going to work on this, and now I love it because now she's working on it. She realized what she wanted, but it was communicating, go back to what we've been talking about today, is communicating her needs, her expectations, and then asking the questions too. Like, with the I statements, like doing the I statements is so, so powerful. I remember so I grew up in a household, if my parents got in an argument, they didn't talk. It was quiet. You walked on eggshells around the house, and then all of a sudden everything was fine. I'm like, that's communication. It's what I thought was communication. So when I met my husband at a young 19, almost 20 years old, if we'd have a disagreement or I didn't like something he said or did, I would just shut down because that's all I knew. And I always love to share how he would start having these discussions with me and he would talk for me. He would be like, he would say something, and he would answer as if he was talking on my behalf. And I'd be like going, I wouldn't have said that. That's not what I would have said. Right. And so communicating, was something I learned through him because he's like, I can't address what's bothering you. I can't understand why you're feeling if you don't share. Now he'll tell you today, Noelle, that I never shut up about it. I tell him all the time what's bothering me, but that's our communication. And our kids, it's so funny. My younger one gets his wit from my husband. My older one, he struggled with how does that banter work, right? And, understanding that and seeing the communication. We wanted them to see that communication was really, really important as well. I just loved it. And one of the things that we do in our marriage is, if one of us comes home and we're having it's been a rough day or something, um, we might be, we say something around, hey, are you open to receiving for a few minutes? So in other words, we're telling each other we want to talk, but I'm asking you if you're in a mindset that, I don't know what your day's been like. Are you open to, and we've made a commitment that if we're not open to receiving within 24 hours, we have to be, right? So we don't get pushed off. I didn't grow up that way. We just didn't talk about it, period. So that's one of the things that we do around communication. And then also learning, that love language. We hear that oftentimes as well, in different things. But since my son passed, we all agreed, my younger son, Nate, my husband and I, that we were not going to hide our emotions. If we wanted to cry, we cried from each other or whatever that might be. And I remember because guys process things differently, but I remember I was kind of like not having a great day. I was, missing Matthew, but my husband came home and he was kind of quiet. And I was like, hey, how was your day? And he was like, life. And I sat for a second with that. I'm like, that's a heavy word, life, to answer that question with life. And then I said, life, because does that mean you're thinking of Matthew today? And he said, yes. So we learn a new communication now. And the reason why I say that is I think we need to understand that communication can change over the years, that communication style, but to never stop with that communication, I think is really, really important. So Noelle, what are some of the things like when you work with your clients, and I know your husband, you and your husband work together, and I love your hubby too. What are some of the things that you help your clients with that communication? Because sometimes you're scared of saying, this is how they feel. I mean, I can tell you right now, I have a kind of a strained relationship with my mom because she won't stand up for herself. And it's hard to watch her go through that. Even after my parents are divorced, she still doesn't step in and stand up for herself because she doesn't know that she can or how to. So when you have somebody that's sitting across from you and they're struggling with that, what are some of the steps that somebody can take if they're listening today to say, these are some ways to start communicating what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do is we have a personality profile that we'll do with our clients right off the bat. And there's four main types of people that their main personality type is either talking about systems and the plan and the purpose, um, the community and the relationships, being taking action, what needs done, or information. What are all the details? What's the why? What's the purpose? What's all the background? And when you know the personality of the person sitting across from you, you can speak better into their language. And same with the love languages thing. So we take the personality and the love language and we put those together when we're working with couples to say, here's the best way to communicate love to your partner because you're talking in their personality style and in their love language. And this is what it should, could look like that would best love them the way they would feel it. And it's important to understand that each of us communicate differently. One of the first stories we talk about, we were in marriage counseling before we got married, and the counselor told my husband that he didn't have any common, or my husband said he didn't that I didn't have common sense. That's what it was. And the counselor was like, no, she doesn't have Robert's sense. It's different. Common sense is different for everybody. And it's what we grew up with. We all grew up in different families. I mean, my daughter's going through it now as she's 2 years into her marriage. It's what we grew up with is our circle, our way of knowing, our way of communicating, our way of loving and being. But if you look at what your spouse's upbringing was, it's different. They didn't go through the same experiences. They didn't live in the same city necessarily. They didn't go through life the same way you did. And therefore, they think differently and communicate differently. So you have to know how you communicate and what's best for you, but it has to come out. I really encourage women to journal. When you're working on communication with yourself, write it out. You can speak into a computer nowadays in many different applications. You can type it out. You can write it with your hand. There's different ways that it works differently for others. And there's times I love typing, but I really like the hand movement and holding a pen in my hand. I'm old school. I get that. But getting those thoughts out of your brain, sometimes so you can even acknowledge that they're there, and then you can work on communicating them with others. But you've got to understand that we're all different and we come from a different background. And you have to be willing to acknowledge Pearl's life was different than mine. And it's okay. It's just different. We all have different upbringings. And now how can we work together? We do it at work all the time. We have to. And working on a relationship sometimes is more difficult because it's 24/7. You're always there with the person, but it's very similar. We have to work together. Let's work on how. And sometimes it takes a class. Go to a Bible study together or a marriage counseling, or there's marriage classes all over, in the church and not. They're very valuable. And a lot of it is on that communication.
Yes, and I love what you said, that's Robert sense.
Yes,
That's so cool, but it's so true because you're right, we were all brought up so differently that, I remember my oldest son, he used to say, "You're such a dictator." I'm like, or not dictator, drill sergeant, he called me drill sergeant. "You're such a drill sergeant." I'm like, "Well, I grew up that way. I grew up that your dad said how jump, you didn't even ask how high, you better jump." Right? Don't just and assume it's better be the highest you could jump, right? So I'm like, I'm nothing like that, but I told him I will acknowledge those things come out of me because that's how I grew up. That's
right.
and where my husband, it's like everything's sort of a joke, right? It's kind of funny. And I remember when I met his family, his Uncle Jim, I love Uncle Jim, but Uncle Jim used to pick at me. And I grew up where you didn't talk back to your elders, right? So here I am, this 19, 20-year-old meeting this, 50-some-year-old man, the 40-year-old man, whatever it was at the time. And so he's joking with me and he's picking at me. And I'm just sitting there, again, I was still early in my relationship with my husband. So I wasn't really answering, back or anything. And I would leave with my husband on our way home and I would be like, "You have to talk to him. I don't like how he says such and such to me." And my husband says, "Well, you have to tell him. You have to push back. Let him know." And I'm like, "No, that's." So I remember one year at Thanksgiving, I will never ever forget this. We used to do Thanksgiving with my husband's family and dessert at my parents' house for Thanksgiving because they lived about an hour from each other. And so we just finished Thanksgiving dinner. We were just drew our names for the family gift exchange. And he was just doing this pick, joking at me. And I just lost it on him. I just let him know how I felt, that I didn't appreciate. I don't remember what I said, but I just lost it on him. And I told my husband, I'm going outside. When you're ready to go, I'm ready to go. And I walked outside and Uncle Jim follows out like 2 minutes later. He's like, you finally stuck back at me. I've been waiting years for you to do that. I'm like, don't treat people like that. You should not do that. He goes, I was trying to get you to push back. And like, I'm like, yeah, but that's not how you do it with me, So it just reminded me that, like you said, everybody's upbringing is so, so different. I like what you said about journals. And so, Noelle, tell everybody about the journal that you've created.
Yeah. So a little background is I spent a season trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And I was going through worksheets that somebody else had put out, and I was just struggling. I was frustrated with the worksheets. I was frustrated with my life. I didn't know where to go, and I knew I needed something. I was working my job, and I wasn't really necessarily trying to quit. I was just trying to figure out what I should do in life. What do I want to be when I grow up? That was my biggest statement. And so my husband looked at me one day and said, "Then write your own." That's an option. What would that look like? It was just that was probably the most eye opening, pivotal point in life. It's like, oh, I could do that. So I took those worksheets, I took books that we had worked through as entrepreneurs, and all these thoughts of what would somebody need to go through to figure out what they want to do in life. And I put together this document that was massive. It was like 17 topics. And I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, okay, I'm done. That's what I did. You told me to do a book. Okay, there you go. Now what? And I didn't know what to do with it. I was still working. I wasn't into this entrepreneur world yet. And I don't know what to do with it. And so I was processing through that, and I was trying different avenues. And then we met a publisher who was publishing my husband's book. And we ended up spending a day with him in Florida and showed him the planner as well. And so he's like, let's print it. Okay, now what? So this book got published. It's 52 pages. It is very thin. It's a small 7x9 book, and it is a workbook. It is not a book you read and absorb. It is something that you actually do. And it's not a journal. It's not, you're writing your daily thoughts. It is a workbook to figure out where you are at, where you want to go, what you want to do in life, and working on steps to get there. One of my favorite topics in there is being intentional in relationships. We are the people that we hang around with. And if you, like, Jim Rohn says the 5 people you hang around with, 5. Think about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they encouraging you? Are they bringing you up to the next level in life? Or are they just keeping you stagnant or pulling you down? You need to be intentional about who you spend that time with. Your Uncle Jim. Think about those family members that are draining you. It's not that you need to divorce them and leave. It's be intentional about the time that you spend with them. You take on Thanksgiving. It's an example. How much time? Okay, we're gonna spend with this family. We're gonna spend with this family, and sometimes there's multiple families you have to deal with. You're intentional of how much time you're with each. You're trying to give everybody equal time. But if you don't get along with one family, it kind of gets unbalanced, right? Which is okay. Be intentional about that. So the book is called Dream Life Planner, because you're planning your life. You're looking at where you want to go in life and working on the steps to get there.
I love that. And I love that it's not thick too. I like a good journal. It's not too thick, and and then also creating that workbook out of it too. I think it's so amazing to do that. So this has been so much fun. So I'm going to do a little shift here with you, Noelle. We're going to kind of still along what we're doing, but we have this amazing group of women. It's called the Shira League. We're growing. I think we have over 25 women now in the league, and we meet every Sunday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're working on things that, we're working towards goals. We're working on supporting each other in joy. We work on supporting each other in challenges. Everybody's life is a different spot at that every Sunday. Nobody's on the same page, but we always try to bring some sort of positivity support out of it. So one of the things that we start working on, we get rid of the first few months. In September, we start talking about goals. because everybody waits till January. It's like September, October, November, December is kind of quiet. So why don't you work on it then, right? So we started working on their first 6-week goal they want to work on for this year. So one of the things that they had to do first, their first exercise, was to create a joy list. They had to create 10 things that bring them joy. And not just, oh, the sun brings me joy. Well, why does the sun? What about the sun makes you feel happy, right? Like really tell me what it is. We had one girl in the group, she's a hairstylist. She goes, well, I love when my clients come in. Well, why? What's so great about your client come in? And they're like, well, when I cut her hair, okay, that's great. But what happens that puts the joy in your heart? And she was like, well, they get a whole new look and they look in the mirror and they see themselves differently. I go, see, that's what brings you joy is how they see themselves.
Yeah.
So they had to create 10 things. I want you to play along with me, Noelle. And if you would give us your top 3 things that bring you joy and why do they bring you joy?
So the one that comes to mind first is my granddaughter. I have a 1-year-old granddaughter. She's turning 1 next week, and she just lights up the room. The smile on her face, and if you've ever been around a baby, you know exactly what I mean. The joy a baby brings is just undeniable, and it's unimaginable. It's just that. It's pure joy. Um, my marriage brings me joy. 30 years we've been together. We both have previous marriages. We've been working at this for 30 years. We've gone overseas. We've gone through struggles and life and different challenges. And it's life. It's living life the way God intended. And it's not easy, but it's joyful. It is when you see your spouse do something beautiful, or my favorite is watching my husband with the grandkids and how he can turn off every anger moment, every hard thing that happened at work and just be in the moment with the grandkids. It's just beautiful. And then I would say working with women who find that spark. And there were a couple ladies that I talked to when we were at the speaker camp, and it's just seeing that moment of, oh, I can do that. Or I never thought about it that way. And just giving them a rebirth in their life so that they can now take steps forward and get out of their own way. It's just that enjoyment that you see in somebody else and them lighting up when their life when they have light bulbs on.
I love that. I know it's so much fun watching. I feel the same way about my clients, watch them, go, oh, I have one client who she really wanted a dining table. She wanted it so badly and she wanted a car. But her husband did not, want to spend the money. And I'm like, his language right now is how much is it going to cost me? So you need to answer to that. You need to give him some options, create options that he can choose from. And so she did that. And she got the table and the car. And what's funny, I had the same conversation with my son, who I'm hoping sometime soon he's going to get engaged. So I was like, so what are you going to do for the ring? If you start, well, I saw this band at Kay's Jewelers, so I thought I'd get her this band, and the next day we'll go pick out the ring. And I'm like, well, son, just take her and be like, hey, if, thinking about, if, I'm sure you guys are talking about it. It's like, yeah, I'm like, just take her out and have her pick her top 3 rings and then pick one of the 3 that you like. He goes, but what if it's not her top one? I go, the point is she picks the top 3. But in his head, he's like, I want her to have the top one. I'm like, okay, then ask her which one's the top one, out of the 3. So, but I love that you share that. And you're right. Kids are so much fun. I mean, my son, before he passed, he was dating a beautiful girl. Her name's Brittany. And she already had a little girl named Evie, and Matt just adored her like she was his own. And she just, she doesn't really talk really well right now. She's working on some speech issues and challenges, but she communicates like just with her smile and things she does. It's so, so much fun. And I can't wait to see my husband with grandkids someday, because I think you're right. It just changes everything about you, which I think is so beautiful. So you talked earlier about you like to do lists and you like the idea of checking it off the list, right? So the ladies had to create a not to do list. 10 things they have to stop doing in their life that keeps them from being with their grandbabies, keeps them from having time in their marriage, keeps them from helping women find the spark. So, Noelle, what are the top 3 things that would be on your not to do list, and why would they be on that list?
Oh, now that's more difficult. You don't think about those every day. We talk about what we're grateful for all the time. Um, I mean, settling and dawdling and trying to figure out life. Don't just sit there and do something. You need to just do something. It doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes you just need to take action instead of, oh, what should I do? And I think that's part of my stage in life is trying to figure out what I should be doing. And like, well, just do something, right? Um, I think there's apps on my phone I could not open that might be a little bit more beneficial than Facebook from sometimes, right? Social media nowadays is just an overwhelming evil, necessary evil in some worlds. Um, what not to do? And I guess for me, it would be texting. I am very much a communicator by word and not by vocal. And I would much prefer to email or text somebody than to call them. And that's not always the best form of communication. So think about what the other person and how that conversation would be received and what the best use of my uh, words would be.
Those are 3 really good ones that I like sitting and doodling. I love that. Like sometimes you find I'm gonna sit down for 5 minutes and then 2 hours later you're still sitting there not really doing anything. But sometimes you need to do that too. We acknowledge that. But then social media, I get that. So I found a new platform to schedule all my social media out. So like all my Friday posts are scheduled to the end of the year. And
Nice.
like all like pretty much the only one I have to do is like every 2 weeks. Like this weekend, I'll work on one that keeps me 2 weeks ahead just because it's a lot more. I do a daily pearls of wisdom on my social media. So that takes a lot more thinking and processing. So I'll burn my brain cells out if I try to do, past a month. But because I want to be genuine, with it. So what I found by doing that, I'm really not on my phone anymore because I would be on my phone to go post something and then I'd be like scrolling doing that scroll. So I found I'm not doing that anymore. So I love those are good. And you're right, texting, like calling versus texting is yeah, that's powerful because I do that too. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll just text them real quick, but sometimes I just need to hear the voice. And let me tell you that um I was reminded last night there's a huge lesson in my son's passing. Um, some of his friends were trying to help me with his phone and they locked his phone up. So I couldn't get to everybody in his phone to let them all know what happened. But for somehow or another, I got a new phone and somehow or another, our 2 lines are merged onto my cell phone. I don't know. I'm
Right.
sure it's a God thing. And so every once in a while, I'll get this message, a text message say, hey, what you doing? And I know that's somebody trying to reach my son, that doesn't know he's passed. And so when that happened, like 2 weeks after like 2 weeks in a row after he passed, somebody showed up at our door wanting to catch up with Matt. But a couple times now, and last night, somebody sent that text, and I had to tell somebody, "Hey, call me. This is mom. Let's talk." So it just reminds me too, like you said, picking up the phone and talking is a lot more powerful. All right. So I cannot believe I looked at my clock here and like we're near the end. So I want to do our betterquestionsbetterlife.com. And those that are listening, I get nothing. I make no money. I don't get any of those, whatever they call it. Anyways, these are called Better Questions, Better Life. You can go to betterquestionsbetterlife.com and order your own set. 77 cards of positive quotes, affirmations. You can journal, you can meditate, you can keep one with you all day long, whatever that is for you. So I'm going to shuffle them, and Noelle, tell me when to stop, and we'll have you answer it.
Stop.
Okay. It says, what habit have you most improved in your life?
Reading.
Oh, what are you reading?
Um, so currently, I have a Power Confidence Ultimate Guide to Unstoppable Self-Confidence by Vanessa Raymond is what's right here on my desk. I
Sounds
mean,
amazing.
yeah, reading is the best form of self-improvement and easiest for me because it's almost free.
Yeah. So my book I'm reading right now, it's called The Smile Method. It's by Seth Elliott. And he wrote it about around grief. And each letter is an acronym. And so it's been very, very helpful through our stages that we've been going through. So it's been a lot of fun. Noelle, tell everybody how they can reach you, where they can find you. We'll also put it in the show notes for those that are listening and driving or if you're watching on YouTube, which by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go follow us and subscribe. But tell everybody how they can find you, Noelle.
Social media into R2 Peterson, and website is add value to life, the number 2.com/women.
Awesome. All right. So listen, everybody, we had a great conversations. Like, it's flew by. I cannot believe it. If you want to learn more about the Shiro League that we've talked about, just email us hello@wsliving.com. That's hello@wsliving.com, and email the word Shiro. We'll make sure you get all that information and learn a lot more about it. We're going to put all the connections to Noelle as well. So you'll be able to reach out to her and chat with her and maybe make an appointment with her and get her journal. It's a great journal. But I want to remind all of you, as you come into this world, we've come into this world as a rough oyster on the outside. But as you start cracking that oyster up and you start shining it, you find your own inner pearl. So I hope you go out today and find your inner pearl of greatness and have an amazing rest of your day.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again.